Welcome to the Housing Shift. I'm your host, Raj Rajendram. Before we get into today's episode, a quick word from our sponsor. Service Charge Pro is the platform helping housing providers fix messy, spreadsheet-based service charge processes. Service Charge Pro was built to make accuracy easier, compliance simpler, and to help rebuild resident trust. If you're in housing and service charges are a pain point, check out Service Charge Pro. Link in the comments below. Right, on to the episode. Welcome to episode 10 of the Housing Shift. This episode is called AI Won't Fix Housing Until Housing Fixes Its Foundations. Now, this is a topic I'm really excited to talk about. It's something I care deeply about. It's something that I think about a lot, specifically AI in housing, and I hear a lot of positive feedback around it, and then I hear obviously a lot of kind of negative narrative around what's going on out there. Something we're going to unpack in today's episode, and with me today to sort of get into some of the issues that we have in housing around AI is Guy Marshall. Hi, Guy.
Hi, Raj. How are we doing?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
Yep, very well. Thanks.
Ready to go? Housing's AI expert. So, Guy, before we get started, do you want to give everybody a bit of context about who you are and kind of what you're doing in the sector?
Yeah, sure, Raj. So I spent 15 years in retail, in data science and leading data science teams to deliver valuable working software that addresses customer need. And through that sort of journey, I built a load of capability, and then I moved to Manchester. And in Manchester, we have some of the most deprived communities in the UK. And I was doing my PhD at the time. So I'd done this career. I was doing a PhD that was in AI, in natural language processing. And I was really very exposed to the issues that we have in Manchester. And it's not just Manchester that has the sort of regional inequality, but it's everywhere in Britain. And I decided I wanted to do something about it. So I pivoted towards housing about 3 years ago. And by housing, I mean sort of the built environment in a general way, because I think having a decent home is where everything starts. It's not just about social housing, it's about that solid foundation for life. And so I do two things mainly at the moment. So two big things. So one big thing is that I look after technology and R&D at a structural engineering firm. It's Port House Dean, and we just do low-rise residential. So we do thousands of alterations to UK homes every year. So we've done tens of thousands of these, and it's very unusual to be doing that. So it's really a very it's a technically specialist part. It's a specialist thing, but we've managed to automate and use AI in lots of that. The second half of what I do is in social housing, and I serve on the board of a registered provider here in Manchester. And I spend a lot of time with senior leadership teams, exec and boards about AI because they want to be making use of the technology that's available in order to provide decent homes that people can afford. And so that's where I've been really deploying that 15 years of skill and the PhD and the postdocs in digital twins and all of this good stuff. Now I'm deploying that on helping people have better homes, including people that live in social housing.
Great, thanks, Guy. So I think your background will help us. Your background in retail and your exposure to another sector will help us think about our first question. AI capability is accelerating. It's everywhere. I look at even, I was thinking about this this episode and just my own usage of AI and just how ubiquitous it is, like within my professional and personal life. I kind of take it for granted now. The dishwasher packed in like a couple of days ago, and I was like triaging this thing with ChatGPT. And it's just it just unlocks so much for us. And we see how other sectors are, blazing ahead with advancements using this technology, but it does feel like housing is a bit out of sync. So, in terms of this moment in time, like how important and how challenging is it for housing to kind of address this potential opportunity, but then everything that comes with it.
Housing is a long way behind in terms of digital, and it's not just a comparison to retail. I've done work in other sectors as well, and housing's a really long way behind. We probably won't get into some of the reasons why I think that's occurred, but what that means is that when we have this additional digital technology, which is about manipulating data, whether it's a large language model like you just talked about, or whether it's to be able to deeply understand your customers and to optimize your supply chains, those things are all about data. Whether the data was originally in words that were manipulated, or images, or as numbers, it doesn't matter really. So the sector is poorly placed digitally, and we know that things like data integrity are really high profile in terms of the sector risk profile, which the regulator for social housing in England publishes. So data integrity, we kind of know that our data structures, by that I mean the whole process from a person doing work to like recording that work and that being translated through to governance decisions, that bit's kind of like it's a sector risk. It's not just one provider, it's a sector risk. And what that means is it's going to be tricky for us to build on these dodgy foundations, as per the title of this podcast, in order to deliver that great value for customers. I think it's really important to step back and think about what's going on in social housing in the UK more broadly. So we've got huge changes afoot. We've got consumer standards that came in very recently. We have Awab's law, which has just come in and will continue to phase in over the next year. We've got professionalisation. We've got 1.3 million families on waiting lists for new homes last time I checked. There's a huge government push to build more homes, and we don't have the people to build those homes, let alone the finances sitting behind it. We've got registered providers of social housing really struggling with their regulatory scores. And let's not forget, those regulatory scores, that's like the bare minimum that you've got to be doing to run decent homes that people can afford, right? This is our mission. And I think it's really a very, very difficult time for the sector. It's a difficult time for government more broadly and for local authorities as well. And I think we're seeing a lot of the pinch points happening in housing now. What we're seeing in government is the AI Opportunities Action Plan that basically says, government, so it's the government white paper, and they've said, we need to make use of AI. We've got to do this. And so we're seeing lots of reports coming out now, running through the National Audit Office about how different government departments have been utilising AI. And we don't have that in housing. We don't have that in housing. We're not subject to the same things. MHCLG is subject to this, but the regulator in between, and then there's us. And so I think this is particularly challenging for us because many of us are not actually government-run organisations. We're not for profit or for profit, trying to provide decent homes that people can afford. And we're sitting outside of most of the usual mechanisms that government has in order to make a sector do what it's supposed to do. So we don't have the sort of commercial incentive, and we don't have the sort of government strategic funding coming in like this. So I think it's a very, very tricky time for the sector to deploy this sort of technology. Add on top of that, the digital bit is also related to digital skills. So the boards that are setting the strategies, they don't necessarily have the digital. They almost certainly don't have the AI capability to be able to make those visionary decisions for the organisation that's going to ensure it's great value for tenants and for the 1.3 million families on the waiting list. So we've got we need to restack some of the skills that we've got if we want to make use of technologies which, as you pointed out, in other sectors are unlocking some really, really good value. I mean, talking back to retail again, 100 years ago, we had corner shops, right? Where would you go and get your food if not from a corner shop? And now retail, and it's the reason that retail's been able to do it is through data. And it's been able to run much more efficiently by doing data, and it's seen a lot of consolidation as a result of that. I'm not sure we'll see the same thing in housing because really that personal connection, the bricks and mortar element is so crucial. But I'm not sure we'll see that level of consolidation. But I do think we will see the value in using data to understand our customers and to be able to provide that great service, and to achieve those value for money savings that we desperately need if we're going to serve the people that we need to serve. 1.3 million families on waiting lists. I'll just say it again because it's too.
No, thank you. Really important points. I say we get our food shop as a delivery, and basically interact with a website and interact with a delivery driver every week, and that's it. And it's not going to be the same. It shouldn't be the same experience, I don't believe, for social housing at least. But it was, you have highlighted there that there is a lot of there are a lot of priorities for the sector, perhaps a lot of things going on, a lot of issues that we're trying to resolve at once that are coming to a head. But the regulation side of it, as challenging as it can be, and as kind of ever changing, and as high stakes as it can be, it does feel like other sectors are regulated as well, and yet they are progressing technologically, and certainly with AI.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So there's two that come to mind straight away that are very heavily regulated, where we've had lots of this. So financial services. So we have the open banking standards that have unlocked this whole fintech space. This wouldn't have been possible without good data architecture. And this then has spawned all these challenger banks, and it's better for customers. Another example is medicine. So this is, as with our homes in which we live, people live here and people die here, right? Medicine is a crucial thing to get right. And now we have AI preventing breast cancer, for example. There's one of my favorite things to talk about is AlphaFold, which is a protein folding thing. Essentially, this sort of niche scientific thing has ended up winning a Nobel Prize because it is so powerful for medicine. It's unlocked. We have now drugs which have been designed using AI, running through AI-designed trial processes. They're in clinical trials. This is really cool and heavily regulated. Regulation absolutely is not an excuse, right? It's not. But what we do have is a lot of sort of legacy and a sort of cultural paradigm that doesn't allow us to try things out very, very straightforwardly. I think there's the pace of change in AI is absolutely nuts. It's like the world can't keep up with this. And our governance structures absolutely cannot keep up. So in social housing, we have you're lucky if you get an annual review of your IT strategy. This is no longer adequate. It's absolutely inadequate. And we need to be revisiting how we're governing our digital, because digital is underpinning, unless you have fewer than about 50 homes that you're looking after, digital is going to be the foundation of your business. So if your digital stuff is broken, your entire process is going to be broken, and therefore you can't make good decisions, and your board can't steer your organization. And so you've got to get this all hanging together through your digital platforms. Otherwise, you're not going to be making robust decisions, and it's certainly not going to be efficient or effective.
So let's talk a bit about these foundations then, because you've talked before about being AI ready and what's needed across the sector in order to support AI transformation or digital transformation. So can you give us some insights as to what we're lacking, or what we need to get moving on as a sector?
Okay, so there's two levels to your question. So one is about individual providers, and the other is about the sector more broadly. Perhaps I'll field the individual providers, because that tends to be where people that listen to your podcast will be thinking. So it's about the data maturity. right? So the kind of junk in, junk out, or replace that word with a different word if you prefer. Junk in, junk out. If you don't have good data, you're going to be making bad analysis on that data, and you're going to make bad decisions as a result. So, and that's related to data maturity. But I see that very much as being, it's about systems, but it's mostly about people and culture. It's mostly about how the organization has taught and embedded its employees and its staff and its customers in order to use data to drive behavior. So it's an organizational thing. It's not just an IT thing, the data maturity. The other kind of things I wanted to call out on this was around how we govern data as well. So you can have that cultural paradigm in place, but you need something that's governing that and making sure that you've got your golden thread going all the way through, from the troops on the ground doing the work all the way through to board that are making the strategic decisions and ultimately submitting things to the regulator saying that they are compliant or not compliant in particular ways. I think in terms of where I think the foundations need to go, so it's mostly about the data part and the culture that goes with that, but it's also about cross-functional teams. So what we see a lot of in housing is you've got your IT department off on one side of the business. Probably it reports into the CFO because it's essentially a cost center, right? It's something to be squeezed, not something that's enabling the business. When I was working in retail, I used to send out people that were software developers. I would send them out on vans. If they're making van software, go on a van, see how the drivers are using it, work out what their problems are. They weren't in charge of making product decisions, but it's so important that you understand how your customer is interacting with your services. And that cross-functional thing, I think we're missing that partly because of the way that digital has kind of gone for the sector over the last 20 years. So there's a data skills bit here. There's even there's information commission compliance type stuff. So I think there's a skills gap. And speaking about the skills gap, so in the professionalization piece, so the CIH, so the Chartered Institute of Housing have their professionalization stream. There's nothing about digital skills in it. Absolutely nothing about digital skills. And so that means who's talking about digital skills in any of the sector bodies? Are NHF talking about it? No. Are HACT talking about it? Yes, and they don't have bandwidth. Like, is the regulator talking about it? A bit via the sector risk profile. Are MHCLG talking about it? Yes, via the, for example, the Housing Innovation Fund. So there's signaling going on, but actually we don't have this kind of digital capability. That you're not sort of being like the non-vendor specific digital skills aren't being delivered into the sector, in my view, in any kind of level. So some IT directors will be creating their own digital literacy training or their data training, and that's great, but it doesn't scale very well. And you've got to remember, we've got a really long tail as well. We've got lots of really small providers of social housing where they'll be really heterogeneous in terms of the digital capability. I think, so AI ready, this is also about how much it's a strategic thing. To be AI ready means, well, for what purpose? And in the current paradigm, that is about optimizing your G, your V, your C. So your governance rating, your viability rating, your consumer rating. And maybe it's about the number of homes that you have as well, which is sort of tied into the viability, but also about that wider mission. And so for people steering those organizations and leading them, it's about, well, what role does AI play in helping us achieve our objective, our corporate objective? So a foundational thing is about lining up your corporate strategy with the actual delivery happening. And is what the organization wants to get out of AI, is it nothing and it's sort of defensive, like we're averse to risk, we're not going to do anything, we want to control risk, we can't ignore it, but we'll try to control it, through to, are we going to automate the existing things that we're doing, and we're going to really focus on our existing process and making that really efficient? Or are you going to go and reinvent processes and use AI to redesign how you're delivering customer value? And all of these are legitimate postures, in my view, and they'll fit for different kinds of organization. But you need to mature to be AI ready. You need to be in a position to mature out that strategy and that approach so that you can deliver against sort of that spectrum that I've just outlined there. And again, in order to do that, you need to have a board that is competent and understands the opportunity, because otherwise your ship is just at sail. I've run board sessions, believe me, Raj, where it's like, we want AI, and I have to have this conversation of, for what purpose?
Hashtag AI.
And that's a very, very common one at the moment. And I can imagine the exact same thing happening with digital. We need to go to the cloud. Or why? Rant over.
So, I think it's really interesting there what you said about the different positions that an organization or a board could choose to take with AI, and actually understanding, or how important it is to understand what position you are trying to take. And I think that's probably step one, isn't it? It's like understanding it enough to actually understand what the position is that you're going to take, but also your position might be a position for the next year or two whilst you prep for another position, and being able to understand that kind of strategy or that strategic direction for an organization. I think it was interesting, what you said there about, I think when we're talking about the sector-wide context, you mentioned about the lack of sort of technical leadership at a board level. I see it a lot even at the chief exec level, the C-suite level at housing associations and local authorities. There is a lack of a CIO or a CTO there quite often. As you said, it's often wrapped up within the finance directorate. But I thought it was interesting actually what you said about the lack of a digital focus from, I think you said it was the CIH training and from the regulator. So perhaps there is actually a lack of technical leadership at the right level in the organizations that are regulating and steering the sector as a whole, as well as the providers.
So I didn't actually say about the regulator. So the regulator encodes that through the sector risk profile.
Right.
The regulator, for the first time this year, put in something about AI in it, into the sector risk profile. It's a one-liner saying, "Don't break the law," basically. So providers should be aware of emerging technologies, including AI, and ensure that they don't breach data protection.
Yeah.
And like the regulator is trying to protect us from harm. That's where this is coming from. And so you can imagine, I can only imagine the kinds of things that they see, and that they've felt that was the thing to put into the sector risk profile. I spend too much time thinking about the sector risk profile because I think it's a really important artifact that's trying to communicate to board members about what the sector risks are and about how to navigate these problems that the regulator from its sort of overarching position can see. I think that in terms of, so you're talking about the sector leadership, I think where the leadership has come from in terms of digital has been from the vendors. And you can see that in the really poor quality products that we have, because I get complaints from IT directors all the time about various parts of their IT stack that have been built specifically for housing and are not fit for purpose, do not support their existing processes. There's no APIs. When they went to the cloud, it was just literally wrap it up and bung it into the cloud. They can't make basic changes to what they need to for Awab's law, etc. It's been really, really difficult. And that's because we've outsourced our leadership and technology to vendors. And that's really bad for customers. It's really, really bad for customers. Bad value for the taxpayer who's paying through housing benefit. They're paying for this. So I think we need to we need to tilt the scales differently now. And I don't think so. What we're seeing in terms of the tech stacks we have at the moment and AI, we're seeing the housing IT vendors sort of shoving AI into their products in random ways, just sort of like bolt-on stuff without being sort of cross-functional or anything like this, and without sort of deep thought, deep technical expertise. And so unless we do something different right now, we're going to end up going the same way with digital, which is a bunch of unhappy IT directors that think that actually the stuff that they're supporting doesn't really serve the business. And I think that would be a mistake, actually like a national level mistake, for us to allow this to happen with AI as it has done with our previous IT stuff. So we need to be doing things at a sector level that's a bit different in terms of our approach. And it is unfortunate that we can't look to CIH for it, because there's some of the skills that CIH would be able to provide. They're very, very busy. I get it. This is not a blame game. Will provide support. So we've got the UK Hive coming up. So this is a new HACT initiative. One of the big streams there is around data, because that's what people that were involved in designing this, they'd said data is one of our big issues. And so for 2026, that will be a big chunk. So we'll be able to look to HACT for some, not for leadership, but for creating a consensus. Except, as you pointed out, there's very few CIOs. There's very few people that are thinking strategically about technology and housing. And so we're going to end up with a bunch of sheep leading each other. And so I think there, from my perspective, as somebody that cares about the customer, who, like, we've got people that need homes, we've got people in homes that need decent homes, and we don't have technology that is supporting the sector. We need to work out how we're going to build this digital capability, because it's not going to come from up on high. We're going to have to build it. Raj, in this podcast, you are building this digital capability. So that's kind of how it's emerging at the moment, and whether there ends up being some more formal leadership through MHCLG, don't know. Might happen. I mean, I think we've discussed the regulator of social housing. It's not just about England. In Scotland, there's much more leadership from the Scottish Federation of Housing Associations, much more technical leadership. They've released an AI-readiness guide, right? So they've seen a gap, and they're like, we're going to unplug this gap. Leadership is, they get a little bit philosophical about it, but I guess leaders are people that have followers, or leadership is like a system meta capability that unlocks other capabilities. And so it depends on how you see it. The leadership doesn't need to come from an individual. It could come from a group. But I think here, because things are moving so quickly, and because we don't have it sort of entrenched culturally, I think it could be a bit risky if we allow it to be emergent as a property of our system. This is turning into a cybernetics thing. I'm really going off on that today. You've caught me on a funny day, Raj.
That's good. So part of the challenge there, I feel, is are the silos that we work in the sector. But we're gonna come back to that. I just wanted to go off on a slight tangent myself there, because you did mention, vendors to the sector. Obviously, that's my day job, being a vendor of technology to the sector, and the approach that we've taken in building something in partnership with the housing association, its residents, and their users, and actually kind of trying to understand the problem. You mentioned there about sending developers out on vans. Like, we've literally been entrenched in this team, in this process for 2 years, lots of learnings, but have built something that actually works, and we're very proud of, and can work at scale, and can certainly improve a lot of the experience for the actual residents in terms of receipt of their service charge figures and statements and whatnot. So I can't imagine having taken another approach to this, where it would have been built in a vacuum and go, here you go, can you buy this off us, kind of thing. So Yeah, definitely needs to be some change around that in the sector. But coming back to the silos point, so I think in pretty much in every episode of this podcast that we've had to date, that somebody has mentioned about silos in the sector and how it's causing an issue in whatever subject we've talked about. And I feel like in all the areas that you mentioned there and all the groups that are kind of trying to do bits here and there, we are still doing all of that in silos, whether that's within organizations or across in the sector. So yeah, how do you think that's impacting or going to impact the rollout of AI?
So let's take that again at two levels. So within a particular provider, you've got these different silos that are different delivery functions. And what that means concretely with AI is we will see things that are probably not spanning across most of the silos, which means that we'll see postures from boards and from exec, which are much more on the automate your existing process.
Mm.
That's how we will see AI. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing AI used for summarizing meetings on Teams. This is standard stuff. And we're seeing it for within silo operations. And that's cool, right? That's absolutely fine. And also it is not going to end up with us building housing another 1.3 million families, because it's the same stuff as we've been doing previously. It's the break and fix model. So I think the organizational silos mean that we won't be able to go. It will be hard work for us to deliver a transformative approach that doesn't involve your boiler breaking and then somebody goes out and fixes it. It's the predictive piece that means we reduce the demand overall. Currently the system is just not geared up for that within any of the providers of housing. And then then you scale that up. So then you think about the sector level. What does this mean for the sector that we are siloed off into individual organizations? It means that the sector is building an arrears model 1,000 times, because every provider is building their own little model in their own little silo, in their own little part of their organization, when actually the arrears model is probably exactly the same as the one next door. This is the corner shop analogy again. Mm. To forecast demand, it's much more effective. It's like you get better models and it's cheaper if you take all of your corner shops and say, oh yeah, well, they've sold 10 bananas last week. They've sold 10 bananas. Oh, probably going to sell 10 bananas in that shop as well. Like, this is just more efficient. And when we've seen mergers, we haven't seen in housing, we haven't seen good economies of scale because we haven't unlocked this capability that is residing within the data. So it's going to, like, the silos mean that it's going to be really difficult for us to unlock value at scale. Again, unless we start doing something differently. So what we've been doing with so there's a group that I chair, Housing AI Leadership and Implementation Exchange. So this is Haley, housingai.org. There's more than 300 of us now, including vendors, because vendors are providing so much of this technology leadership. And we've started building stuff. And it's all Creative Commons, open source licensing. Things are available on GitHub. And we're building bits, and we're just having some conversations now about building some models which then are built on the hacked UK housing data standards so that anyone can just plug in. But not plug in, we're not owning the data. You can just take it. You just take our model and we'll give you a guide, like there'll be a guide for how to do it. And if you make a change to the model and make it better, fantastic. Perhaps you could share it back and create a fork. We need, like, my vision for this is way more like Wikipedia, right? Like properly auditable, open, repeatable. We don't need to be siloed like this. And the advantage with this model is that we can do it without disrupting some of the existing ecosystem. We can just have all it will take is a few individuals to say, hey, I've got this thing, somebody else can use it, and then we'll start a movement, I hope. And it might be that we end up running that through Hacked, and they would start curating a library of this, like they've been kind of owning the data standards. And that I think is part of how we can leapfrog and unpick some of this stuff while also incentivizing the data standards and the continued focus on data integrity. Does that make sense, Raj? Or
Yeah, for sure. So we've talked a lot about broad strokes around what needs to happen across the sector, where the underlying issues are. If we're going to give some, if I'm a housing provider and I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, wow, there's a lot that we need to do, right? And there is. There's no getting away from it. But what are some practical first steps that they can take to to get on this journey?
So it depends on where in the organisation they reside and kind of like how much cultural clout they've got within that organisation. I would be saying, so if it's someone like a chief exec, I'd be saying, have a look at your board composition and think about that kind of board capability bit, and about how when some people are rolling off, maybe then you bring in somebody that's got a bit more of a data-driven decisions lens on it. So we often see digital specialism. I think there's quite a lot rolled up into that. But I think I would certainly be looking at that if I was in the chief exec shoes. The other thing I'd be looking at wherever I was in the organization is the data integrity part. So it's following that data all the way through. And if you're a repairs manager, it's about understanding how your repairs operatives are actually keying this stuff in so that then you understand what those numbers mean. And maybe if you're particularly minded, you might make some dashboards and make it nice and visual. And it's like, actually, this number's junk. Let's understand that, guys. Let's get together and work that out so that then we make sure that when we're feeding this up and up and up and up, then that number means what people think it means when they're making decisions. And slowly starting that cultural piece. Because if what we do is just say, so with AI, if what we do is just say, hey guys, here's ChatGPT, go fill your boots, we end up with data breaches, we end up with decisions being made which are not in anybody's interest and probably not compliant with the relevant legislation, and we've totally lost control. We've lost control of our cognition and our data. And so there's real risk that we're not governing it. And so let's talk about the data first. And then once we've got the sort of as-is data a bit more under control, talk about what does the customer need and how can we delight the customer, and then how can tooling, including AI, support that delight of the customer. And it's got to be that way around. We mustn't go around the route of, I've got AI, what can I do with it? It's important you're aware of what it can do, but we absolutely, like, if we go backwards, it's the cart before the horse. It just doesn't work.
I'd like to also add, you mentioned earlier about digital or technology strategies that, at best are kind of like annually reviewed at the moment, but typically are kind of 3 to 4 year strategies. I think also corporate strategies, given how entrenched and supported by tech your corporate strategy should be, it feels like setting a kind of 3 to 4 year corporate strategy now is, or certainly doing it without having a kind of regular strategic review of that strategy is kind of setting yourself up to be a bit lost in a few years.
I think that's right. Most providers are not culturally positioned to be able to pivot very quickly. And we've had to respond to changes in regulation very fast. And it's been very hard work. In sort of a more tech world, we optimize for moving quickly, learning fast. Like move fast and break things is like a bit of a motto. Is that okay in housing? No. Because if we break stuff, people will die. Like, this is really serious. We've got to take this very, very seriously. You can't just be shipping bad stuff. So there's a balance, but right now, if you were to, so I have very recently just done a refresh of a strategy for a housing provider because they were like, actually, this just doesn't match with where we need to be now. So we've got to have a new strategy. But most organizations are not able to pivot that quickly, it would just be kind of chaos. So I think it depends on your organizational culture about whether it can tolerate that level of disruption. But as you're saying, Raj, the reality is that every couple of months we have a new frontier model that is performing better. Like I'm a chartered mathematician, right? And there's now natural language models which aren't even really built for doing maths that are better at maths than I am. This is crazy. Like it's not obvious that would even be possible. so yeah, I mean, keeping up with the reality of the world, I think is, and I'll be a bit risky with this one, but our boards that are mostly retired people going to get this? Mostly not in work anymore. I feel like I can only claim to slightly keep up because I'm spending half my time in a proper tech firm that isn't in housing, because that's where this is happening. This is where it matters that last week a new model was made, and so we had to run everything through all of our benchmarks again, and we are now having to change over all of our APIs because there's a better model. And that is so far away from the kind of conversations we have in social housing. It's just unthinkable, right? Like it's years away. It's many years away. So this is a long play. There are quick wins to be had, but you need to govern them, and you've got to get the stuff right at the exec and the board level, because otherwise it's just dithering around, right? Like and ultimately, again, we need to provide decent homes that people can afford. And I think on the old trajectory, we're not going to make that. So we need to do something differently if we're actually going to do it. And I think if we are honest with ourselves about it, I think we've got to try something much more effective to collaborate across these silos, because otherwise we're not going to deliver.
Which brings us nicely onto the last question. We're looking for something highly effective. We give every guest a magic wand at the end of the episode. And so for you, Guy, if you could unlock one thing that's going to enable the sector to properly leverage AI meaningfully tomorrow, what would that be?
It's a very glamorous one, Raj. I would
it's got to be shiny.
The data standards, hacked UK housing data standards. If I could magic wand that and get everybody so that a repair means the same thing for every single provider, then I think that unlocks huge potential for us in terms of AI. Also fixes a bunch of our sector risks, because we'd understand a lot more about data integrity. And I think then we would have safer, better managed homes, happier tenants, and we'd be in a much more effective position to be able to deliver the new homes that we need to.
There we go. Maybe not as shiny as some might have thought, but certainly a very powerful and important wish. I can't grant you, unfortunately.
But there are people that can grant it. So MHCLG and the regulator for social housing could mandate this, and they could say we require regulatory submissions in the data standards format. So there is someone, Raj, that could grant my wish. And if you are listening to this podcast, please
let's shout them out. Well, Guy, thank you so much for joining me. I mean, it's been really clear how powerful AI can be or could be for the sector, but without the right foundations in place, that it's just not going to land. I mean, you mentioned there in one of your previous answers about this being a long play, but we just need to get started, because it's just going to get longer. We're going to get more out of sync with what's happening in the rest of the world, and it's our residents and that 1.3 million families on the waiting list that are the people that are going to lose out on this. So yeah, thank you, Guy, for joining me.
Thanks, Raj. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. So if you like this episode, please hit like, please subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next Housing Shift.